You know, I think maybe something has changed. Look at this. This is Marco Mendicino, the Minister of Public Safety in the Trudeau government. In 8 years of Trudeau government, I have never seen the mainstream media scrum a Liberal cabinet minister in this way. Never. Have you? Just watch.
How is it? And we have questions. Come on.
Why didn't your staff tell you what's the explanation?
How is it credible that all of the most senior staff who are paid for by taxpayers and government and the PCO and the Prime Minister's office and your office knew, but somehow you and the Prime Minister were only told after the fact? How is that in any way credible to the average person who goes to their job and does their job every day?
Okay, first of all, let's all take a breath. And I want to be responsive to your questions. What I said was that I would be coming down to take more questions in this afternoon. But
you said
what
that
I would say,
and then you didn't cut your office.
We waited for 5 hours for you yesterday.
Well, I'm here right now, and I will be here again. Absolument. Tout à fait. But I agree with you that there is a challenge there, which is why we have taken steps to address that through corrective actions internally, as well as by making sure that the CSC works very closely with victims' families going forward.
Why didn't your staff tell you? Why did not?
Is it standard operating procedure at your office that you are kept in the dark? And will you let anyone go in response to the handling of this?
Of course not. And my job as the Minister of Public Safety is to make sure that we are identifying issues where there are challenges on information flow. And so what I have done in each and every one of these cases is to be responsive to those challenges by issuing ministerial directives to clarify so that we are strengthening our ability to get the information that we need. So that has been done certainly in the case of Bernardo through the issuing of a new ministerial directive. As far as internal matters, I've dealt with it.
What does that mean?
Why can you just answer? Minister, what is the explanation? If it's not to keep you in the dark, what's the explanation?
So, again, I can not answer all of the questions when they're coming at the same time.
So why didn't your staff tell you? What's the explanation? What was the explanation from your staff as to why they didn't tell you?
The short answer is it is unacceptable. And my job is to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And
That's
the way
not
to do
answering
that,
the question.
Why did it happen in the first place?
It's not your first day in cabinet, right? Sorry. You're many years into cabinet. It's not a new...
So Bernardo going back to maximum security or not?
I'm going to come back to that question, but first, what's important is that these issues are identified and they're corrected. And so that is what I have done with my team to be sure that there is no further breakdown in information flow. It is important that I get those briefings in a timely manner. That is made abundantly clear. More importantly than that, back to the question that was posed, I believe that the decision to transfer Paul Bernardo to a medium security institution does not sit well with Canadians because it is in the front to the victims, in particular of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, and that is why we are going to support them. We're going to make sure that victims' rights are at the center of these decisions and that going forward, victims are notified in a timely manner before those decisions are taken.
So will he be moved back?
Have you ever seen that before? I mean, running and shouting. I mean, Mendicino is particularly goofy. He skipped a press briefing yesterday, so the press were hungry. He's been caught in so many lies. He's become a bit of a joke and a bit of a scapegoat for Trudeau, to be honest. But still, have you ever seen the regime media, the media party, act this way with anyone in Trudeau's government in the 8 years since Trudeau took office? I have not. Maybe that's what it's like when literally 81% of the population thinks the government has overstayed its welcome. Oh, don't get me wrong. Every single one of those journalists is still going to vote Liberal on Election Day. Of course, they would never bring themselves to vote for the Conservatives. Never. It's a matter of taste and class and tribe for them. But by the same token, they're done pretending that everything's fine with Trudeau. So what do Liberals do when they're in trouble, as they are? Well, one thing is to talk about abortion and about how the evil Conservatives are going to force every woman in Canada to get pregnant and go back into the kitchen and barefoot and whatever. You know the drill. Here's the latest example from yesterday. Later today, our House of Commons will vote on the Conservatives' latest attempt to reopen the abortion debate in Canada. Pierre Poilievre's decision to fast-track this bill shows where his priorities lie. Okay, take a look at the video.
The Conservatives are accelerating their efforts to reopen the abortion debate here in Canada. While we were originally scheduled to debate a Conservative private member's bill proposing a tax credit for medical treatment this evening, the Conservatives made a last-minute change. Apparently, discussing abortion was of a greater priority to them. And so we will be debating Bill C-311 this evening. One of two things: either Pierre Poilievre is pushing to have this debate, which reopens the question of abortion here in Canada this evening, or he has no control over his caucus members. Perhaps it is because he has an interest in supporting his self-described 100% pro-life candidate in Portage-Lisgar. I know that the by-election date of Monday is coming up quickly, and that the Conservatives are making all attempts in order to attract their anti-choice voters there. One thing is certainly clear: Bill C-311, proposed by the Conservatives, is yet another in a series of transparent attempts in order to give legal status to a fetus here in Canada.
But look at this new feature on Twitter that I really like. Ordinary people can correct liars on Twitter. It's called a community note. And look at this. Bill C-311 is an act to amend the criminal code, violence against pregnant women. Abortion is not mentioned or implied anywhere in Bill C-311. So it's a weird lie, but again, anything to frighten people back into voting Liberal. And that works a bit, to be sure, don't kid yourself. But the go-to for the Liberals is really to call names in general: far right, racist. The new one is transphobe. It's what they did to the truckers. It's the default for Conservatives. But usually, I think I'm right here, usually Trudeau saves that insult for people who aren't actually in power, in the center power, in the establishment. He says it about journalists he doesn't like, or opposition politicians he doesn't like, but he generally, for example, wouldn't say it about sitting provincial premiers. Even Danielle Smith, who is quite libertarian and freedom-oriented, because Trudeau knows he has to work with those premiers fairly collegially, and he will want their cooperation on some matters at some point in time. He doesn't want premiers whipping up their own provinces and others against him, politically, in the media, or even in court. He wants pacified premiers. Maybe I missed it, but I don't think Trudeau has actually shot any rhetorical cannonballs against Alberta's Danielle Smith. Do you recall any? I can't without really doing a deep search. In fact, I think he sort of absorbed her criticisms without replying in kind, as in she threw some shots at him and he didn't shoot back, which, by the way, is smart, because if Trudeau had attacked her, she would have immediately got an extra 5% on election day. I'm sure of it. Trudeau attacking an Alberta politician is a guarantee for that politician to win. But look at this. Blaine Higgs is the Premier of New Brunswick. I'm going to read now from the Toronto Star, but this is actually written by a Canadian press. It's a wire story that was published in many places. Here it is in the Star's version, but like I say, it's the same everywhere. Higgs is pushing changes to sexual orientation policy in schools, known as Policy 713, that would force children under 16 to get parental consent to change their names or pronouns at school. The previous version of the 3-year-old policy required teachers to get a student's informed consent before discussing names and their pronouns with their parents, and was meant to make schools inclusive and safe for LGBTQ children. I love the language there. It would force young children to get parental consent. A child's informed consent. That's the thing, though. A child can't consent to many things in life. That's why children can't get tattoos. That's why they can't be bound by many contracts. That's why we have a law called statutory rape, or age of consent. You cannot have sex with a minor. Even if they say they consent, they can't. That's the source of the old saying, taking candy from a baby. Because children of tender years cannot consent, and they're easy to manipulate. And if they say they consent, well, they're just being manipulated. That's why we protect children. That's what's going on here. If parents are not shaping their own young children, then Someone else is shaping them, and whoever is telling students to keep secrets from their own parents is likely the manipulator. Duh. That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.